Hey guys, welcome back. This should be the penultimate video for this series, but happens to be one of the most complicated of the videos. So let's get down to business. Strike everything, unstrike everything. Okay, we will be using four resources total for this video. There's this pages document with 6 points on it. We will run through them through the course of this video. There is our application itself. This is the state of the application. No surprises here. I'm not going to bother continuing the demo for this. Then there is our GIF. We're familiar with this. In this particular video, we're going to work with the reducer. We will work with dispatching of actions. We will see how the reducer will update the state, return the new state, so on and so forth. So let's get cracking. And no surprise as to the state of the app. If you've been following this video series so far, you know exactly where we are. I am not known for going fast. Okay. So let's follow our to-do list. This is a complicated lesson. Not too complicated. You should be able to follow along. So we have to start by creating a counter reducer. Let's get down to it. Go into the counter folder, create a new file. counterreducer.js. Okay, perfect. And we will create a counter reducer. Const counter reducer equal to createSlice. CreateSlice is a helper method that is provided to us by redux.js, and this takes a few properties. Property number 1 will be name, and we'll call this count. We'll call this counter. Property number 2 will be initial state, and we have one property in this initial state, that is count. Property number 3 will be reducers, and this is going to be a bunch of function definitions. So let's see what we can do with this. The initial state is going to be the state local for this reducer. Every single reducer has its own local state, which is ultimately combined to form the store, and the store is the global state of the application. Okay, that was a mouthful, but and I shall not use too many words without demonstrations. Come on, why isn't my mouse working? Come on, move, please move. Okay, so we created a reducer, beautiful, and I want to create one function in it. I'm going to call this function increment. Every function within the reducer takes the previous state and takes an action and does something with the previous state and the action. Specifically, it uses the action to update the previous state. So state dot count plus equal to 1. So this function, when it receives a particular action, is going to update the value of the count by 1. I see that I'm not exactly using any properties from the action, so I'm going to get rid of that argument entirely and clean up my code like so. Perfect. Now I can strike this item off because I clearly have created a counter reducer. And the second point is I'm supposed to put the reducer from the object returned from the createSlice in the store. Okay. Now this particular function createSlice, it returns this particular function createSlice returns returns an object that has two properties that I care for. Property number 1 is counterReducer.reducer. I care for this particular property, right? Why do I care for it? Because createSlice itself is not the reducer. the reducer is in the object returned by createSlice. createSlice is a helper method. So my actual reducer is this guy. So I'm going to default export it because the name of the file is counter reducer. It only makes sense that the default export is a reducer. What do I do with this reducer? I'm going to combine it with other reducers to form the store. Counter reducer. Perfect. And that should be the end of point 2. Next, come on. Export action from the object returned from createSlice. Okay. The second property of counter reducer that I care for is counter reducer dot actions. createSlice returns an object that has 2 properties that I care for. Property number 1, reducer. Property number 2, actions. Actions is a bunch of actions that I can use in other components. I can dispatch these actions from other components. Actions itself will contain many sub-properties. What are the names of these sub-properties? The names of these sub-properties are the same as the names of the reducers. So there's an increment reducer, there's an increment reducer method, there is an increment action. Similarly, if I created a function x, y, z, that also accepted state and does some nonsense with the state, I would have an x, y, z action. In fact, for the sake of this demonstration, let us persist with x, y, z. I know it's a silly function name that does nothing, but whatever. For the sake of this demonstration, let's persist with it. Back to pages. We have fulfilled point number 3, export action from the object returned from createSlice. Okay, now let's get back to our GIF because we want a clear indication of where we are and where we're going, right? So far we have a reducer. Perfect. The reducer takes in the previous state and returns a new state. And we have done so in, come on, where's my VS Code? We have done so in line number 10, no, line number 9 to 11. We have a reducer that takes in the previous state and returns a new state. Perfect. We have the store, that is a combination of reducers. We have the store, that is a combination of reducers. Perfect. And we have no, that's it. We now have to figure out how to dispatch actions, right? So back to counter reducer, I have these actions. How do I dispatch them? I dispatch the actions from the counter component. So I enter the counter component. How do I dispatch these actions? I'm going to do import useDispatch. Oh, come on, useDispatch from React-Redux. useDispatch is a helper method provided to me, and yeah, I'm going to use it to dispatch actions. And in order to use the helper method, I'm going to create a little constant within my component. I'm going to call this dispatch. Some of you will observe that these lines of code, some of them can be repeated across many applications without distinction, and that's a good thing, because if you have one boilerplate application, you can pretty much copy paste code into new applications. So that's a very good thing. Okay, now we have dispatch, but we really still have to dispatch specific actions. In order to dispatch specific actions, we're going to import them first. So there was an action called increment that we exported from our counter reducer, right? We look at line number 18 of counter reducer, we seem to have exported an action. We're going to import that over here from period / counter reducer. Okay. Now how do we dispatch it? We dispatch it we dispatch it when the plus button is clicked. So when I hit the plus button now, I should be able to dispatch an action. Dispatch increment. Come on. Bingo. Now how do I know that this action is getting dispatched? We know based on this GIF that every time an action is dispatched, it goes into the reducer. Let's wait a second. We will in fact see an action being dispatched. Yes, the action is being dispatched and that goes into the reducer. So if I'm able to log the action in the reducer, then we know that this action is in fact getting dispatched. So let's go into the reducer. Let's put our role argument back, action, and let's log it, console.log action. There are a few developer tools that will also let you do the same, but I don't want to go there just yet. You can maybe learn it in your own time. I prefer learning through console logs. Bad habits, I know, but please bear with me. Okay, so if I hit the plus button now, I should see a log statement describing the action. There you go. There is in fact an action. It says payload undefined, and that's hardly a surprise. In the next video, we will in fact work with payload, but for now, there's an action getting fired, right? And the count is getting updated, which brings us to the next question. How do we see the updated count? I don't know. Let's find out. But before that, let's get back to our to-dos. Import action in the counter component. Have I done that? Yes. In line number 4 of the counter component, I seem to have imported the action. Okay. So let's scratch this off. Next, dispatch action from the counter component. Have I done that? Yes. We just saw a demonstration of it. Line number 20 does dispatch an action from the counter component. Okay, last piece of the puzzle, access new state from the counter component. Okay, how do we do that? In the following way. You have another helper function provided by React-Redux library. It's called useSelector. Now, when I type useSelector, my VS Code shows me a hint. It says useSelector accepts a parameter called selector. What is the type of the parameter? The type of the parameter is a callback. The callback itself accepts one argument called state and returns an unknown. Now, having read through the documentation, I know what the unknown is. So let's get down to passing the argument for useSelector. We know that the first argument for the callback will be state, and the return value is going to be the specific value from the global state that we want to access. And this is the specific value from the global state we want to access, right? State.counter.count. Now there's going to be a bit of confusion. Why is it state.counter.count? Well, it is like that because when we define the reducer, we're giving it a name. We are repeating the same name in the store. So what we are essentially doing is we are passing the local state for the counter reducer, and we are setting it to the property of counter in the global state. Do you follow me? I will repeat this statement one more time. We are taking the local state of the counter reducer and assigning it to the counter property in the global state. Right? So in counter.js, when I do state.counter, I have access to the state of the counter reducer. In the state of the counter reducer, there is a property called count, and that's the value that I'm really concerned with. I hope you guys are following. If you do not follow it, play the last few seconds on repeat. Hopefully it'll sink in. Now back to the demonstration. I see a red squiggly line. That's because count is defined both in line number 7 and 12. I will not be using React hooks anymore, so I'm going to delete this entirely. Now count is fine. There's going to be other red squiggly lines because set count no longer exists because I deleted the React hook. We will deal with other buttons later because I want to make sure the video doesn't go on too long. It's already gone on for a good 15 minutes. Oh my. Okay. Let's see. This particular line will give me access to the value of count from the global state, and I'm going to access it here in line number 24 as I always did, and hopefully we can wrap the video up there. Plus, there you go. The value count is being retrieved from the global state that is provided to you by Redux. This is a major milestone. Now the other buttons will not work right now because we removed the click handling for the other buttons, and we will use Redux based click handling for those buttons in the next video. Sorry, this video went on a little too long. See you in the next video.